All right, good afternoon. We have a forum. I will call then the September 2023 Moines area MPO Policy Committee meeting. For a motion, second to approve it. So moved. Second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Item 3 is the vote on the fiscal year approval, or excuse me, approval of the meeting minutes from the move approval.
Second.
Motion to second, any discussion, changes? Favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions, motion carried. Item 4 is a consensus vote on the financial statement. I'll turn it over to birthday boy and we said happy birthday.
Wow. Happy birthday. Great way to spend my birthday, right?
There you go.
No, there's really nothing new on the financial statement. The finance subcommittee reviewed it on their own. We didn't even really have a meeting this past week, so they approved it. Nothing new.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion on second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Abstentions, motion carried. Item 5 is consensus vote on the approval of the credit card application.
Thank you. We're simply asking for approval to go to our bank and ask for a new credit card. They require a form to be filled out that shows that the board approved us doing that. The reason we need to do that is because the credit card we have its own former director's name. If we're having trouble getting it out of it, we just want to change card and wipe the slate clean and probably be willing to cancel the card for it. We can't do that either, but we just want to get something else that we can bring it over.
Todd has done everything he can, isn't it, all those conditions there, we issue that.
Under approval.
Second. Second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Abstentions, motion carries. Item 6, public comment on MPO activity. We have there's a speaker there. Okay, we will move on. Item 7, presentation on the SS4 application. Are you gonna introduce it?
Yeah, I'll introduce this very briefly. This is Steve Abel, the city of Des Moines, also the chair of the Transportation Technical Committee. We're trying something new today. We're trying to use this as a forum to bring you updates on some of the regional priorities and transportation projects that are happening throughout the region, whether or not the MPO is lead on them. So we're going to start bringing in more guest speakers from within our member governments. The reason we're starting off with my neighbor is because the city of Des Moines is in the process of going for money for safe streets for all. That is the position everyone else in the region, or everyone else in the region will be in once the MPO has completed its safe streets for all, or the comprehensive action safety plan for the region. And so we thought it would be nice to give you a preview of the types of projects that the city of Des Moines is considering, so that you can start thinking more broadly about what type of projects you might consider a year from now.
All right, thanks, Gunnar, and thank you, members of the policy committee. As you mentioned, my name is Steve Neighbor, city of Des Moines resident and city engineer for the city of Des Moines, and also chair of the Transportation Technical Committee. So again, as Gunnar mentioned, when we were talking, we thought this would be good timing. As you know, I think last month you all approved a contract to start that comprehensive safety action plan, and so this is kind of show you what could maybe come out of that plan in terms of implementing it. Okay. So the bipartisan infrastructure law that established a discretionary program that programmed $5 billion appropriated over 5 years. Okay, so the program that we submitted for is the second round, so there'll be 3 more years. Okay, the purpose is focusing on roadway safety and eliminating fatalities and severe injuries. That's the main focus. There are 2 types of funding for the 2 grants. There's the planning and demonstration grants. The MPO was successful in getting a planning grant or doing the comprehensive safety action plan. And then the implementation grant is the one that we're targeting here and we've submitted for. And I do want to point out that the Safe Streets for All program, it requires an action plan to be in place before applying for implementation money. Okay, that's one of the big benefits. Not only our safety action plans kind of give you that focus to improve safety and reduce fatalities and severe injuries, but it also does open the door for these implementation grants. Okay, and they've issued a notice of funding opportunity, and that notice does have criteria and goals, and that's again, focusing safety, those death and severe, reducing death and serious injuries. They want to look at how can we attack a larger geographic area, and then they have an equity component as well. As well as a number of other criteria. I'm not going to go through all these, but it's all spelled out in the notice of funding opportunity. The city of Des Moines, we established a Vision Zero goal with eliminating deaths and injuries on all streets by 2040. That we just adopted and approved our comprehensive safety action plan in June. As part of developing that plan, we had a consultant team help us, and we looked at historical crash data and developed what we call a high injury network map. And that's a map basically showing where crashes have resulted, more often than others for death and serious injuries. So we developed that map to identify those corridors where kind of our problem areas to give us, where do we focus? Where do we want to focus if we want to really attack those numbers and lower those crashes, those crashes? We then took that data and overlaid it, the MPO maps out environmental justice areas. So we've overlaid that data with the MPO's environmental justice mapping, and then developed our projects based on that. So and I'll explain a little later kind of some also more why these projects are selected. But this is kind of the map. The projects are shown in red here, what we've identified. They consist of 5 projects. We're going to look at more of a geographic area. So we targeted, 5 areas, 5 corridors that have a high crash history, especially with severe injuries and fatalities. First one, Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway and 19th Street. This is north of I-235. It's currently one way pairs. And what we did is what we heard from the folks at FHWA in terms of selecting selecting projects, want to identify what the problem is and how we're addressing it. So these are actually clips that you see on the screen from our application that very clearly state, here's the problem with the corridors and here's how we're addressing it. So for anomalous crash types, broadside, swipe, rear end, the pedestrian facilities are right along the corridor. They're not very comfortable. So again, but how do we address that, right? Building sidewalk gaps, fair use path, curb extensions to shorten the pedestrian crossing, and then also right sizing down to reduce the number of travel lanes. The roads that have only 10,000 vehicles a day in each direction. So this is kind of a graphic going again, currently 3 lanes in one direction, reducing it down to 2, which allows parking on one side and also narrowing up the corridor to make room for those pedestrian facilities and as well as the shared use path. And this is kind of just a graphic showing that, but this project alone is about $4 million. And so we are looking for the 80% match for this project. So, and you can see right there, the sidewalks right along the edge of the travel lane. It is not a comfortable corridor to walk along at all. Douglas Avenue, this is also US Highway 6. If you're familiar, you may recall we actually worked with the state to do kind of a demonstration project. The state resurfaced Douglas Avenue between Merle Hay Road and Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway. So we use that opportunity as a pilot project to convert it from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. So this project would actually do the more permanent type improvements. And so in other words, moving curbs, improving the sidewalks. Again, this corridor is similar issue, that the sidewalk facilities there's gaps, the sidewalks are right along the road, some of them are narrow, and so to improve transportation options for both, as well as again those crashes. Again, we talk about rear end, broadside crashes. Okay, well, 4-lane roadways definitely are prone to those types of crashes. So going down to 3 lanes is a focus to help with that. Speeding, right? 4-lane roads, we know are prone to those jockeying maneuvers and people driving more erratic and fast, right? The hope is that most people drive at a reasonable speed. And so when you go down to 3 lanes, the reasonable drivers will hopefully control the speeds. So again, just a graphic here showing the before and after. Again, a 4-lane undivided roadway, narrow sidewalk right along the roadway, and going to a 3-lane road. This is an aerial that a colleague of mine, Matt Miller from the DOT, provided with a pilot project. But it's a $10 million project. We have $4.5 million in surface transportation block grant funding. And so we would be looking for $3.5 million to help assist and fund that as well. Usually Avenue US 6, this is going right through the Highland Park business area. And the focus is Des Moines River to 2nd Avenue. Again, another pilot project with the DOT that we worked on to take it from 5 lanes, in some cases it's 4 lanes, but west of kind of the business district, or what it was 4-lane undivided, and then right through the business district, 5 lanes, or 5 lanes. So we, with a pilot project, have used pavement markings and temporary islands to reduce that down to 3 lanes, so we can see the before and after how it performs. So this project, again, you know, is focused on, you know, again, what are the issues? Rear end, broadside, side swipes. Again, common practice with those 4-lane undivided roadways, okay? And one thing I want to point out, again, when we talk about identifying problems, the DOT publishes rankings of potential for crash reduction. Unfortunately, these rank high, which is not something we want. And so some of these are some higher ranked corridors compared to others in the state for potential for crash reduction. So again, kind of an exhibit showing what it is, going from, in the business district, going from 5 lanes, again, now it's down to 3 with the pilot project, but we'd be actually building physical bump outs and curb extensions to actually shorten those pedestrian crossings, and then actually make the 3-lane more permanent and more walkable and slow folks down. So these improvements, we're looking at about 3.4 million, again, looking for the 80% federal funding assistance to help with that. Forest Avenue is a street that goes right through Drake University's campus. Again, it's it only has about 7,000 vehicles a day, but yet it's a 4-lane undivided roadway. So, and again, right in front of the map center, right where we have lots of pedestrian activity. And so we look at, again, what are the issues? You know, we want to provide options for folks, bike lanes, you know, how do we make the crossing safer for pedestrians? Well, certainly a 3-lane roadway is much safer than a 4-lane roadway to cross. And then, you know, how do we address the crash types? So looking at, again, going from 4-lane undivided, and in front of the map center, there's not really driveway access points, so there's not really need for a left turn, a bi-directional left turn lane there. So there's actually a median that will be designed with refuge islands to help with the, you know, folks crossing there between the map center. And this is, I know it's a hard graphic to see, this kind of gives you that aerial view of it. You know, again, we got Drake Stadium, the NAP Center, and then we got the new high school stadium is over on the right of the screen. You know, it's almost done, right? And this is just kind of a graphic, you know, this is a street view of what it looks like today in that 4-lane undivided roadway. Again, looking for the 80% match. Southeast 14th or US 69 and Maury Street, unfortunately, is ranked first out of 389 similar corridors with the DOT's ranking. That's again not a ranking we want. Very high crash rates, you know, the crash pipes, you know, again, rear end left turn broadsides. You know, again, Maury Street, lots of truck traffic. And we got high volumes, 31,000 vehicles a day on US 69. And so that's kind of look at some of the issues there. Pedestrian facilities, we have made some tweaks to this, but this is kind of an earlier graphic. Okay, so we would be looking at adding a shared use path along 12th Street, and then as well as improving the sidewalk facilities. We'd also be looking at a new connection. The Maury is right over here, and so we'd actually be closing off Maury to the west, and then providing a new connection that would be connected directly to Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway. Okay, and so again, what that does, separates some of the conflict points we're trying to reduce the number of conflict points with turning vehicles. We'd be looking at doing something called positive offset intersections. This is something my wife gets annoyed at me about when we drive around. You know, it drives me nuts when intersections have that, which is called negative offset. What I mean by that for left turns, what I mean by that is when you're sitting there ready to make a left turn, and the opposing left turning traffic impede your vision to see around them. So what we've started doing in the city, if you went to the state fair over by East 30th and East University, right at the corner of the fairgrounds, we took out the DOT medians and shifted the left turners over so they could see better around each other. So it's again creating positive offset left turning intersections. So it also kind of helps with the connectivity. Again, in Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway, a lot of folks right now cut through on the side streets to get there. This will give them more of a kind of a direct connection to Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway. And then as well, which is always is a challenge, but working through with the number of driveway access points. Some of these businesses along here have several access points, so reducing the number of access points is shown to help improve, reduce those crash rates. So $6 million effort, again, looking for the 80% as well. And again, we've been working with the DOT on these concepts since it is state highway. Oops. So overall, again, this is our map again. The overall of all the projects, 27 million, and our ask is 17 million for the Safe Streets for All grant. And I know, especially remember, but in general, the Safe Streets for All grant, federal money, again, has kind of that 5-year period to construct the projects. So these projects, some of them would start in 2020, late 2025 or 2025. And then with the last one, Douglas Avenue being more in the 2028 to 2029 time frame construction. So again, all these being constructed within that 5-year period. So again, why these projects? One, they meet the selection criteria for Safe Streets for All. Again, we talk about safety, equity, engagement. We've already engagement, collaboration, working with the DOT on these, working with Drake University on these. And also achieving those goals that the DOT has as well. They are on the high injury network. We have the federal match program, and number 2, we have the concepts developed. We've already gone through and had lots of public engagement for some of these, and we've developed concepts. They aren't just like, just things we just thought up. These projects have been vetted. Some of them even have pilot projects. And then project readiness, again, you have to hit that window of when you could, when those projects need to be constructed. And I don't expect you to read this, but the point of this slide is a couple things. One, the Safe Streets for All, it's a little different than the RAISE grants. RAISE grants were 30-page grant applications. These are actually 12-page narrative, and they have a specific checklist that you submit, forms that you specifically submit, so they've kind of parceled it out and made it as much as possible for the application to kind of, follow the same order. And you submit those through Valid Eval, which is a little different than that Gov, the website they had before. I kind of went through that real quick. Is there any questions on that? Again, the hope is one just to kind of share with you, that next step, implementation, what could come out of, doing the Transportation Safety Action Plan, which you all approved as an MPO, just kicking off that last month. Okay. All right. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, so good question. His question is, how the eligibility, how we get this. So the MPO and the consultant team and it finishes the Transportation Safety Action Plan. How do we address this? Well, the Transportation Safety Action Plan that the MPO is doing would act as that action plan. So in other words, Urbandale can say, well, if we have a project that is one of the, identified as a priority or meets the goals of the action plan developed by the MPO, that would be our action plan, so we could apply for the implementation plan. That's the benefit of it.
And when it comes time, when ours is done, we'll have to address, I think maybe what you're getting at, is if Urbandale wants to do it, if West Des Moines wants to do it, if anything wants to do it, do we all compete against one another, or how does it work? One benefit of the MPO doing it is if the MPO applies for those funds, we're eligible for up to $50 million in grant application. Any individual city, I think it's 20 or 30.
Sure. Yeah.
So the MPO could essentially apply for as many projects as it can do in that $50 million. And everyone, if we know what those projects are, just like we did here, what those 5 projects were, the MPO doesn't, what are the 20 or 30, whatever, how many projects that is.
Yep.
We would know that as we do that.
Yeah, and you would, obviously, I think that would help with the collaboration aspect and the geographic area, right? It's not just one community, we're trying to solve an area in the whole metro.
All right, great, thank you. All right, we'll move on then to item 8, which is report on the federal fiscal year 24-27 TIP program amendments. Zach?
Yes, thank you. We have 3 requests for TIP amendments on the agenda this month. The first one is from the city of Des Moines for their Southeast Connector project. This project was split into 2 different phases in the most recent development of the TIP. The city has come back and requested that we combine those projects back into one project and update the total project cost to $58,000 to reflect that it's all one project again. This project has been awarded a little over $11 million in STBG funding. The next project is from the city of Johnston for their Merle Hay Road traffic signal improvements project. They were awarded ICAP funding in the amount of a little over $621,000. And their request is to move this project into federal fiscal year 24. They were not able to get some things completed this year, and so they need to shift it over into 2024. And then the final project is from the city of Polk City for their North 3rd Street reconstruction. This project has been awarded a total of a little over $1.1 million in STBG funding from the MPO. The update here is just to clarify the project description a little bit. That new description is listed there on the screen before you, but the DOT just wanted a little bit more clarity in that project description. So these are the 3 projects that are before you. These were presented to exec last week. They recommended approval. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, that motion carries. Then item 9 will be a report and vote on the fiscal year 25 entertainment program.
Yes, thank you. We have 3 projects that have been submitted for federal fiscal year 2025 ICAP funding. Those projects are listed on the screen before you. We discussed these projects last month. We have one from the city of Ankeny for their North Ankeny Boulevard improvements. Polk County submitted for traffic signal improvements project, and then West Des Moines submitted for their traffic system vehicle detection improvements. So following approval at this meeting, staff will forward the resolutions onto the project sponsors so they can include those in their applications that are required to be submitted by October 1st. Happy to address any questions you have. Otherwise, this is before you for your approval.
Move it, Polk County.
Second. Motion by Hawkinsmith, second by Haddon. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, sign. Abstention, motion carried. Item 10, report and vote on Safe Streets and Roads for all grant. Zach?
So staff has been working over the last few months to develop our grant agreement for the Safe Streets and Roads for All funding that we receive. This grant agreement is a very typical standard grant agreement that we have seen on past awards we've gotten for federal grants. It includes things like the general terms and conditions of accepting federal funds, a timeline of when the project will be completed, budget, and then performance measures. I would note on the timeline, what we have in our agreement with the consultant is that they will do a 12 to 14 month process, which will set us up to be ready to apply for the funds that will be available in the 2025 cycle. I will note that if you look at the grant agreement, you'll notice that that timeline is extended beyond that. The reason for that is while working with Federal Highway, they suggested that we add a buffer in there just in case we needed it. We are not anticipating that it will take us that long to finalize our plan and close out our grant agreement. Just wanted to make a note of that. I think I've got some information on the next slide here. The grant agreement does break out the funding between the MPO and SERPA. If you recall, we received a total award amount of $1 million. 1,000 of that is for the MPO, and then 200,000 of that is for SERPA. They wanted us to do a joint agreement so that they would only have to work with one entity. So the MPO will be handling the reimbursements for both the MPO and the SERPA plans. And we are currently working on an agreement with SERPA on how the reimbursement process will work and how we will be the ones, the MPO will be the ones handling those reimbursements. I think that is all I have for slides. I'd be happy to take any questions you have about the grant agreement. Otherwise, it's before you for your approval. It was presented to exec last week and they recommended approval.
Move approval.
Polk
County.
Great, got it. Thanks, Sean. Motion to second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, that motion carried. Item 11, report and optional vote in MPO 2020 urban area boundary update again.
Thank you. Following each trail census, the law requires that the MPO update its urban area boundary. The urban area boundary is defined and it takes into account urban areas as defined by the census. So this last 2020 census, they changed how to define what an urban area was. Previously, it was any area of 2,500 or more people. This most recent census added a housing component. So if you're urban, you either have to have 5,000 or more people or 2,000 or more houses. So the urban area boundary, as it relates to MPO, is a couple of things. One, it affects the highway performance monitoring system that DOT utilizes, but primarily for our purposes, it really defines federal functional applications. Depending on what your roadway is classified as, defines what source of money and cost of money you're eligible to apply for. So on this map, there are a couple of things. The blue hatch area is the 2020 urban census. That's something the census designated. The red is the previous urban area boundary that was approved back in 2020. The green area around that is the adjustments that are proposed for this round for the urban area boundary, and then the black line is the MPO. So by law, the urban area, the census urban area has to be within your urban area boundary for the green line, and then your green line, your urban area boundary has to be within your band. They kind of nest within. I'll note a couple of changes that happened due to those census realignment on definition for urban area. One is that Carlisle is no longer considered urban because it falls below that population threshold, so it is no longer part of the Moines urban area, that census definition. The other part is that Polk City, because it did move above 5,000 and it's far enough away from the Moines urban area as defined by the, it became its own urban. So whereas before it was included with this the main part of the urban area, now it's its own separate entity. So the blue area, the urban area as defined by the census, is a census item. The green area, the urban area boundary, that's a federal highway definition. So that one really relates to transportation planning, which is why it relates to road. So the adjustments that made were to basically extend out to cover additional urban areas that have expanded in 2010, as well as create a new urban area for Polk City, which does share some boundary within with the Des Moines urban area for all intents and purposes. So in addition to this UAV update process,
We'll also be going through and identifying any changes to roadway classification that resulted since the with the 2020 census update. So the citizen planning data we will start that process. Here, staff at the MPO will also work with local jurisdictions to identify anything that the DOT doesn't, and submit those changes to the DOT for their review as well. So once that process is finalized, the MPO will also then begin updating our planning area. So we'll start by requesting copies of community comprehensive plans and future land. The reason for that is because our planning area, the MPO's planning area, must at a minimum include the required census designated urban area and our urban area boundary, and the contiguous area expected to urbanize over the next 20 years. So by reviewing the comp plans, we'll be able to include the land area the communities have identified. The planning area also, and for our purposes, the most important boundary, determines funding for both STPG and CAP dollars. So those funding costs are based on population within our planning area. So those funding levels again are based on what our planning area is. Generally, when we make adjustments to our planning area, it doesn't really result in a lot of changes to our funding, just because on the fringes, it's lower level development, less population, so it doesn't really result in that. But it does affect projects and what they're eligible for. So the planning area determines funding eligibility, mostly for Polk County, Dallas County, Warren County, because they're members of both MPO and CERTA. When they're looking at a infrastructure project, what cost of money they can go after really just depends on what's fine there. So with that, staff recommends approval of the urban area boundary adjustment. Have to take any questions.
I was for pretty good funding then.
Because the planning area determines funding, they'll be within.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so they'll be part of this. It's just more for application breakout.
So obviously Carlisle's still in.
They would be within the planning area, but just because that urban area, as defined by the census, was just so far inward, it just got left out for road classification.
Is there any issue with CERTA or RTAs that come next to them?
No, so with the planning area, basically with the MPO and CERTA, just come to an agreement on where the MPO planning area is gonna go, so CERTA would agree to, any adjustment.
Because essentially they're losing area as we grow.
Yeah, and that's something that happens across the state.
And then is the definition of urban area the same as metropolitan area?
No.
I didn't think so. That's a whole nother definition.
Yes, that's why
For the, yeah.
just urban area.
And they changed the definitions, correct, too, so that's why it's a little more confusing.
They also removed the definition, which we probably heard that out of, I don't want to say.
Wouldn't want it.
Move approval. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All for the executive search. This is an update, this is what we discussed in our last meeting, the executive search committee has met, moving forward on putting out an RFQ for proposals and helpers as far as the advertisers, we get applications in. We anticipate it to be a confidential process for what other organizations have done. So we're working on that right now, trying to get that back out to the committee for review and approval. We'll get those RFPs, responses back from identified search firms, and then we can really have that, bring that back. I need to look at it, but we are, the bottom line is we are moving. Very slowly. We are happy to answer any questions. All right, then item 13, report on the water training, Zach.
Yes, thank you. So pay estimate 9, we are currently waiting on that to be reviewed by United Riley. They've had some staff that have been out of the office, and so it's taken them a little bit longer to get to that. We're hoping to get that any day. And since you approved us to do these administratively, we'll be able to make that payment and start working on the reimbursement just as soon as we get that in. It is going to be a little bit over $1.2 million. As far as work that is currently underway on the project, they've been harvesting river sand to use on the south bank. They've also been working on the maintenance path on the north side of the river. And then they're also mocking up the cascading drops to determine if there's any modifications that need to be made to the size of the rock they're using. I think I do have a couple pictures here on the next slides kind of showing some of that. This is a picture of the mock-up they did of the cascading drops. There's going to be 7 of these along the north side of the river. They're 10-foot steps made out of these limestone boulders, which will essentially create that kind of whitewater feature there along the river. And then on the next slide, there's a picture of that maintenance path that they've been working on as well. So just a quick update on what's going on with the project. Happy to take any questions you have.
Zach, any questions?
Bob, just has the drought, low water levels help hurt them, or, you know, what are you hearing from the project managers?
I'm having a little trouble hearing the question. Could you repeat that question for me, Bob?
The question, Zach, was what effect has the drought had on the system? Did it help or a hindrance part of the project?
The lower water levels generally are helpful to the contractors being able to get into the water. Early on in the summer, the water was higher and it did delay them a little bit, but with lower water levels, it allows them to access the river more easily.
I have 14 and report no.
Thank you. A couple months ago, when I stepped into the interim role, I outlined a plan for basically a 90-day transition plan, and some of the goals and challenges were up there on the screen. But I took it before, but there were basically this one, we call reconciliation, going around meeting with everybody, understanding what's the word, how can we help repair relationships, everything. Phase 2 implement some changes to help stabilize the organization, and then step 3 kind of set us up for transition. So what I wanted to follow up on and report out since we've gone through that 90 days now. So on the next couple of slides, I won't go into these in great detail, but you can see that we have accomplished all of these. When I'm proud of the active listening, met with every policy universe over the course of that 90 days. Heard a lot of great feedback, a lot of concerns, ideas, and so forth. And those are reflected in some of the work that's happened since. We address staff, we work with everybody to make sure, you know, work continues here at the MPO. Stabilization, if you recall last time we met, improved the procedures manual, we cleaned up financial reporting and procedures around that. So those are some of the examples we've done there. And then moving into the transition, just kind of getting things and just making sure that whoever comes into this position is not walking into this. We kind of cleaned up things, we got everybody working in the same direction. And I think we could accomplish. Through the listening sessions and through some of the work, a couple recommendations, right? This came out that I want to share with you all. The first one is, I hope everyone's aware that we are in year 5 of 5. We talked about the strategic planning and when the right time to do this place as well. But one idea is now that we all seem to be agreed that we're transportation, you know, in the past that was kind of the debate, but then once we're transportation, why not just use the strategic plan in our long range plan? The long range transportation plan also works with a 5-year cycle. So it cut down, make it more efficient, but it also reinforces that transportation aspect of the MPO work. The long range transportation plan essentially lists out, you know, analysis of the system. What does it look like today? What do we think it might look like in the future to address the goals and objectives, just like other plans? And then we do open solicitation for projects. So we get hundreds of projects submitted to us, they get a plan. And then we do a financial plan to show you that we have, you know, FCEG funds and roading tax funds and others. Okay, all of that would still continue. The idea here, though, was further from among all of that, what is the MPO we're doing? One of the handful of projects that we want to get behind and actively lead for fund or administrative support of, or whatever it might be. It might not be policy, or projects, it could be policy. According to the things we've done in the past few, but we would have a discussion up front in the long range transportation plan. And then that would come back for the annual basis. That's one idea. The second one is somewhat related, but it's more of getting at how we make that decision of what we focus on, which essentially would be some sort of decision matrix or decision tree to help us figure out where on the spectrum does MPO get involved. Are we in a lead position, sort of like we are with Purple Line Highway, are we with transport, water trails? Are we more in a support position like we are with a lot of projects where we might provide funding, we provide technical assistance where we need to, but otherwise the local community is more in charge? Or is it more of a supplemental or one-off thing, like our contract with CERTA, like our contract with, a few other things we've done in the past? So that's the second one. The third recommendation would be, and this is based on feedback we heard during the one-on-ones, would be looking at our some boards, what I call a board assessment. Looking at how are we functioning, are our committees the right way, our representation way should be. One thing that I did hear from talking with folks was that they felt the executive committee is really engaged, people on there, and it makes sense because they meet twice as much as all the committee. But then the tech and policy committee are maybe a little more of a rubber stamp. And how do we address it? Because at the end of the day, the policy committee is the one that kind of defines the final decision point. So we want to make sure everybody feels engaged, and that is actually the case. So that would be a little bit what we did in the strategic plan as well. That would be more like governance. So those are the three ideas or recommendations. We had a discussion on this exec, and I refer to the exec member, but I think the support is fairly positive. If this is something that people are interested in, we can come back and experiments and maybe another little bit more. But now I'll show you what the decision would look like, maybe a little bit more detail on this when the time comes. And I guess I'll stop there and open it up for questions on this. You want to talk now or follow after? I'm open to it.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Hawkinsmith, Polk County. And to Dylan, I think these are excellent. You've done a nice job putting together what the issues are we need to face. And I really like item 2, and you and I have talked about that on deciding what role we play, because it's kind of complicated, especially for new board members that come on, newly elected officials or new staff people that come on, understanding how we identify projects that we report on and talk about every week and how we support or don't support. So I love that. So anyway, I think these are really good recommendations. I like all 3 of them.
Tom?
Yeah.
Further comments? Question?
Thank you for taking the time to meet with everyone. And doing
That won't be the only time we.
I will say, well, it takes a lot of time to try to pin down everybody, so I appreciate the efforts they've made and really listening to what concerns are. Thank you.
One other thing I'll note too is that starting, I think, next week's our first one, we have a couple of them, we'll be going out to all the city councils for supervisors, just to do a general MPO update, which is something we typically done, but it's fallen off in the last couple of years. So if we haven't reached out to you yet, we will be doing it soon. Maybe next week we go in Carlisle and apply. So we'll start with that, and we've got others scheduled, and we'll be coming to the town very soon.
Sure, Scott. Get it all scheduled up.
And if it works better, yeah, at certain times of the year, but it doesn't have to be right now.
It might be
One break.
Anything else for the good of the order today?
I can address these real briefly. First is to pass on a communication from the city of Bond Ranch to the Gateway Post Center for MPO dollars in this. And so we want to pass along the invitation for next week for the Bond Ranch. The second thing I want to remind you is that MPO is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. We're having a celebration in Center Park next week, on Friday afternoon, whoever comes to us loose a little bit and play a little pickleball. And so if you responded to Tracy, either calendar in or email, just let us know. Time we'll make sure that we talk about it. That's it.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to amplify also on this as well. Hopefully you can make some time to come out. I know it's always busy with conflict, but Please spend a little bit of time out there next Friday, please, make an effort to do so. And again, we'll have both policy and technical committees, we don't often get those two committees together, so it's good to maybe have a problem. Pollinization of that is really good, just get to know folks a little bit better. Just enjoy a little time, outside of regular. Hopefully you can do that, and so please, that's great. All right, anything else for the good of the order? If not, then our next meeting is October 19th, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.